folks, this is Danielle from Sybil's Lab of Cartomantics. A little bit of a different filming setup today, but let's see how it works. Today's topic is going to be sort of simple. I've seen a lot of 5 decks for summer. These are 5 decks that I'm using during my summer. I don't know that I would say that these are ideal summer season decks, but given the kind of mood that I've been in and what my needs are this summer, these have been really great decks as sort of medicine, supportive at this moment, and retaining the spirit of the season in a way that feels good at a moment when maybe I'm feeling a little darker than I would otherwise like to. So I'm going to go in alphabetical order, nothing fancy or special, not in order of preference, but we will lead with the very first one in the alphabet, the Ashira Tarot. So I've shown this deck before. This is the size of the deck that's tarot size. But the reason that I chose this deck is because I don't know about you, but I've been feeling a lot of rage lately, and I've needed something to hold that energy for me instead of me sort of holding on to and retaining what makes me feel fury, frustration at the state of the world. Things are good at home, but things are not great in outside of home, in the larger domestic sphere, sort of globally, regardless of where you are, if you are listening to this outside of the United States. So it's a tough moment, and it's been helpful to have a deck that I think really captures the spirit of an angry woman. It certainly isn't only that, but I do think that the Ashira Tarot comes from a woman who is interested in really beautiful and vibrant art, Sarah Wheatley, the creator, but building in the sting of bats and little poisonous nuggets that are buried within. There's a darkness here that I think is special and important. So for each deck, outside of explaining what it is and what I like about it for this moment, I also thought that I would pull a couple cards just to see what the deck has to say to us before we move on to the next one. Give them a chance to speak for themselves. So what is helpful about this deck, Ashira Tarot, which is still in print, out of drive-through cards, print on demand, and all of the links are going to be in the description box below. But what's great about this deck for all of us at this moment, if it's a deck that we already own or pick up, and my copy is edged. So we have the Fool and the Princess of Wands. I think that the court cards in this deck are really something special, so I like this pairing. The Fool and the Princess of Wands. There is a youthful energy to this deck, an openness to it, a willingness to experiment and leap into spirit and passion. I don't think there's anything restrained about this deck, and it sort of makes sense that it would feel good during the summer months, because I do think, in as much as any deck is elementally coded, that this feels like a fire deck to me. So this feels like an invitation from the cards to walk into a more creative, fiery spirit, and a moment that might otherwise feel difficult, and a promise to hold that fire for us if it's something that's not always healthy or feels great. So that is the Ashira Tarot. Now let's move on to the next alphabetical deck. We're going to go to Tarot Avatara. This deck is from Gabby Angus West. It is a Kickstarter deck that is still available the last time I checked on her website. It is completely based on images and the life of Frida Kahlo, and uses as its foundation and tradition Thoth more than RWS, although I would say it's kind of mixed. So these are the majors, and I'll be shuffling them in a minute. But what I really like about this deck at the moment, I don't like the fetishization of pain in general. So I don't like what I think is sometimes an unhealthy suggestion that things are that we feel more deeply creatively, or that we're better at reading, or whatever it is that we're doing, if we engage with depression or pain. That may be true in some cases, but I don't think it's a healthy outlook and point of view. I think that it's a little troubling, actually, to suggest that we need to indulge pain in order to be our best selves as anything, as readers, as creatives. But I do think that if we happen to be in a position of vulnerability or pain, there's something really beautiful about the kinship and creative kinship I feel with this deck. I'm a creative person. I do like to write. I wish I was a visual artist, but not so much. But I love Frida Kahlo as an artist. I appreciate visual art a great deal, and it's part of the reason I like tarot. And she is a person who led a very troubled life and created a beautiful oeuvre and has an afterlife through her art that speaks for itself. So I find her story inspirational at a moment when maybe I'm feeling a little bit tender, and I love the degree to which I think this deck captures the fullness of her story in all of its difficulties and beauties. If you know her relationship with Diego and the troubled nature of their relationship, the fact, for example, that her sister cheated with her husband, and that is the Three of Swords, the card that represents that. So that's the reason. It gives me an opportunity to feel kinship with somebody who has experienced a great deal of pain and created something beautiful because of it. I don't think that the deck is unreasonably optimistic. There's no triumphalist story of Frida being happy after her story of a difficult life and her injuries as a child and whatever. But it is a promise that there is a fullness possible even if we're feeling tender or wounded or have experienced a great deal of difficulty ourselves. So there's a way in which I feel aligned with the optimism in that story and the arc of her survival and creativity. I think that Gabby Angus West, who also created the Bonefire Tarot, did something really incredible with this deck. And who doesn't love this linen cardstock? Okay, so let's see what Tarot Avatara has to say to us about what she can offer us all during this season of our lives, during this moment, what she's offered me and what she might be able to offer you, whether it's just wisdom today or it's a deck that you own and would consider working with. We have the Ten of Swords and the Nine of Swords. I'm not sure about this Nine of Swords. The Ten of Swords is based on a painting that Frida did. The Nine of Swords and Ten of Swords. It goes without saying, of course, that like Ashira, this is a very fiery deck. I'm starting to see a theme here. I think that there's something about this season, and you know, normally I wouldn't think that I need a deck to hold fire for me during the summer season. It really seems like I need decks to hold fire for me in a healthy way. I might be feeling fire in a rageful way, or want to channel that fire into creativity or articulate argument or something, and I'm having trouble with that. And there's a way that I think tarot can help moderate that that outpouring of energy that is less than constructive or managed or restrained. I'm not sure about you, but that's something that tarot helps me through. So that's something that I like about this deck and the other decks that I would say kind of help manage and support that fire energy. So the Ten of Swords and the Nine of Swords, look, I mean, this isn't saying anything different than I think what I've already said. Frida, who did a number of self-portraits, and we see Gabby Angus West's rendition of it here. Here is absolute pain. She is eviscerated, pierced. Her heart is in pain, and her body, based on her injuries as a child, is in a great deal of pain. And the Ten of Swords, if we know the tarot, is a representation of the reality of that. But the Nine is kind of being haunted by the worst of it. It's us living in that cycle of our mind. So an anxiety about the coming pain, whether it's real or not, whether it's really coming. The 10 here seems to suggest that it really is coming, that this isn't having nightmares about the worst that will not come to pass. So there seems to be, and I've always appreciated this about the Nine of Swords. I made a reel about this once. I really appreciate the validation in these cards. They're not exciting cards that when you lay them out, you think, this is fantastic. It's a 9 and 10 of Swords moment. But I don't need the 10 or 9 of Swords to tell me something I don't know. I know if it's a difficult moment. So this isn't telling me, oh no, things have been great for you. Here come the 9 and 10 of Swords. They're validations that if I feel that, it makes sense. And this deck, Tarot Avatara, has got it. She can manage it. She holds that pain. It's not overwhelming for her art, that she's there with it. And I don't think there's the unhealthy fetishization of look how beautiful pain is, full stop. No, pain is pain. And I don't think there's any indication, at least in my mind, that Frida's art was contingent upon her suffering. I think she would have been a great artist. She was an artist before her injuries. But her subject matter, what she painted, and the conversation she had with us people who appreciate her art took its shape on the basis of the story of her life. And that story at this moment in time for me, and probably for many of us, holds that pain in a way that says, I see you, I've got it, it's okay. And your story is not over, but it is a part of your story, and you're not nuts if you feel like that. All right, so that's Tarot Avatara, and the next one, Awakening the Unconscious Tarot. This deck is very little known. It's an indie deck. I'm not sure if it's in or out of print. I'll put that in the description box below, but my copy is trimmed. This is by I think, Russian emigre artist who lives in the southern United States and published and printed this herself. But this deck, it is a pip deck. I think what I like most about this deck is the court cards. They are so vibrant. They feel absorbing to me. So the Three of Wands here. You'll notice the marking of the decans on the minors. I don't think otherwise that there's like so much of an indication. There's not an alignment with Thoth representation or other Golden Dawn indications. It's really kind of, for those of you who like decans marked on your cards, this is the sun, or this is Mars and Leo, or whatever it is. But I do think that depending on how you read numerology, this is the Seven of Wands. And if you have associations with Mars and with Leo, this reads perfectly for those cards. Here we have Jupiter in Leo, the Six of Wands. I find this deck comprehensive. I think that, even with this color palette, and what otherwise might feel too cheery, right? That the pips and the depiction of the pips make this a well-balanced deck. It might otherwise feel a little too cotton candy to me, but I do find this very well-balanced. And the level of detail, look at this magician. Look at her. Just so detailed, gorgeous. This Three of Cups, we have Mercury in Cancer. This Prince of Cups, look at how much you can do path working in that card. So beautiful. The Tower, during my Tower year, this was my favorite Tower because it listed or, depicted the options when your stuff is falling apart. If the tower you're in is imploding, you have all of these options. You can jump, you can hold on, you can, wait until you're pushed out of the window against your will and go flying. You can stand outside of the tower and watch it fall apart. I loved the sense of agency in this card and the depiction of options, that it's not just the building blowing up, but it's you have a decision to make about how you manage the blowing up building. The Four of Wands, Venus and Aries. All right, so that's why I like this deck, and I always like to have a pip deck that I'm working with. And I don't consider Ashira just to be as plain a pip deck as this is. They're both pips with feelings, but I think Ashira is scenic in its own way, and Awakening the Unconscious less so. Look at these card backs, P.S. Look at that. That's so fantastic. All right, Ten of Pentacles. Now let's see. One more court card. Princess of Swords. Look at her. Now let's do a reading to see what this deck has to say to us right now. So I've already said this works for me at this moment in time. During Danielle's summer, what deck is a good summer deck for her? But what is this deck? What wisdom does it have to offer all of us? And whether we're just watching this or whether it's a deck that you own or plan to find. So I had a jumper, the Four of Wands, and we're going to pull another card, the Two of Pentacles. So we have the Four of Wands and Two of Pentacles. Okay. You can't help but look at these cards and think balance, balance, balance. What I like about the Four of Wands is it is Venus and Aries. That's the Empress and the Emperor. That's the Lord of Completion or completed works. There is such, active and receptive masculine and feminine in the traditional sense energy here. The rounded cloud-like rose petals falling in the hard yellow and bright red ground. There's a union. There's a union and stability here, and a softness and hardness here. And the same, we see masculine and feminine presenting faces and the two coins, one on top of the other, that balance, Jupiter and Capricorn, Jupiter being that expansion, and that optimism, the pink and green up and down, a kind of hourglass figure there. This seems like it's saying, as a deck that we might work with or that's working with me and could work for you, that this deck will manage and balance out, will act as the kind of temperance for whatever our overwhelming emotion is. It feels like Ashira is saying, I've got your rage. If you're feeling rage, sit down with me, we can talk about it, and I have a handle on it. It feels like Tarot Avatar is saying, if you feel pain and you're tender, I feel it too, and I see you. This deck is saying, in its optimistic but balanced way, like, if you're feeling a lot, good, bad, or indifferent, let's balance, let's even out. Like, this isn't necessarily, I feel really sad, but this is, those days in summer that you're either sort of manic under the sun, running around, it's great, you're going shopping, you see everybody, it's one of those vibrant summer days. This deck is saying, pause, slow down, even out, make it a slow summer day. And if you're talking quickly at the tarot and you want quick answers, it's saying, we'll have a conversation, but it's going to be at my pace. It's going to be slow. We're going to manage it, peaceful. So this is not a rushed conversation with this deck. This is saying, like, let's go at a managed and calm pace. A kind of invitation to calm down. Although the worst thing you can say to me when I'm angry is calm down, as my husband has learned. All right. Let's go to the next one. This is a newer deck that I am obsessed with. The Bone Sequitur Tarot. And this deck was created by an artist who lost her spouse. And I think, based on what I'm remembering from the guidebook, made this deck during a period of grief. It's not as if she's suggesting that this deck is meant to be a representation of grief, but kind of saying, like, she depicted her feelings, not only considering the creative process a part of her process of emotional recovery and management. Look at these delicious card backs. They're so nice. They're so summery. And clients have loved this deck, by the way, at markets. But it's not just that the creative process was a part of her own emotional management during what was undoubtedly a torturous and painful moment, but you know, whenever we are going through it, we have different kinds of relationships to the meaning of intense feelings. So if you're going through grief, it doesn't mean you forget what pain or I'm sorry, well, I mean pain too. Like pain in the I'm bummed out today. So that kind of like milder, not intense and grieving pain. But it's also not as if we forget what happiness or joy or ecstasy means, but we view them through a different lens. We understand them in the absence of their intensity, what we remember about those feelings in association with whatever or whomever we've lost. There are 2 strength cards in this deck, Courage and Fortitude, and I left both of them in. I don't know that she says in the guidebook or on the website that that's part of her framing of this deck. But I do think that knowing that that was a part of the context of the deck's creation, that's something we can understand. That in grief, when she was engaging the archetype of the Eight of Swords, that this is what it meant to think of the Eight of Swords at that moment in her life. That means something, I think. I like how this carries the traditional stuff of the Rider-Waite-Smith. This is the most Rider-Waite-Smith of the decks that I'm showing, I think. But doesn't holds the spirit of it, but doesn't copy it too much. I think captures the essence in a way that feels new. Sometimes I want a deck. Isn't that a great Four of Pentacles? I love it. Sometimes I want a deck that holds that very familiar Rider-Waite-Smith archetypal structure, but and doesn't cloud it too much, doesn't try to dress it up too much, but is still different enough to keep things interesting, to keep things fun. So, isn't that a fantastic Temperance? You know, when you go through a deck and you're like, isn't that a pretty card? Isn't that a pretty card? There are 2 extra cards in this deck. There's the Labyrinth and Eros, the Garden. She doesn't have a big description of what these 2 cards are about or why these are the only 2 extra cards. I've left them in. I'm not sure how I feel about keeping them in, but I'm still deciding. But they feel special and important, especially knowing the context of this deck's creation. So, let's see. And I took some notes. Let me see what else I wanted to say about this deck. Yeah, I said in my notes, just defamiliarizing enough. So it takes the Rider-Waite-Smith and makes it just different enough to keep it interesting and to keep me on my toes and keep me learning about the different sides and shapes of the archetypes. Let's see what the Bon Sequitur Tarot has to say to us as she speaks to us right now, as she says what she has to offer during the summer season, whether we work with her personally or just sort of take today's message for what it is. All right. We have the Queen of Pentacles and the Three of Pentacles. One of my least favorite cards, actually. Do not love this card. So the Queen and Three of Pentacles. This feels all about, so the Queen of Pentacles, as we know, she is fecund, fertile, nurturing, one with her environment. I just think of her as this kind of robustly creative, like the fully embodied woman. This is a woman who is like full and in her body and creative and shameless in her sensuousness, and not just sexual sensuality, but also just like an appreciation of her senses and all of them. And the Three of Pentacles is creative collaboration. This is, hey, let's get creative. I mean, I've talked about the other decks in relationship to managing my feelings or channeling them, balancing them with awakening the unconscious, validating and engaging them through like the sort of mirror or proxy of Frida Kahlo and Tarot Avatara, or feeling like that overwhelming feeling is held in Ashira Tarot. This is saying set it aside, right? There are all those feelings, great. You've got other decks for that, but go be creative. Like, and I do, this feels accurate for my experience with this deck. This is not, and that's not the only thing this deck can do, right? I'm not saying like this is what the Bon Sequitur Tarot is good for, quote unquote, but in my practice right now, this deck is a good reminder to step back from the overwhelming feelings, you know, the metaphorical balancing of stuff, like all of that emotional journaling work, all of that journaling work and thinking work and journeying work, and like go touch grass, create something with your hands. So you guys know I'm a teacher, professor, writer. Like, I'm really good at the thinking work. Like, I can do talking, I can do writing, but this, it feels like go make something that suits the senses, that's touchable, or go be with touchable things, enjoy things sensually. So I like that, you know, a deck that is saying like leave your house, whether that is metaphorically or actually go out in your backyard and touch grass with your bare feet. So let's see what's next. We have, this is the fifth deck, right? We have the Greek Goddess Tarot. This was a weird pick as I thought about it, but it felt right. So this deck is by Ellen Lorenzi Prince. The last I checked, it was still in print. This is a fantastic and interesting and very unique deck. So there are arrows, cups, swords, and grains, if I'm remembering. Each of the suits corresponds to one of four Greek goddesses. So arrows is the story of Artemis, cups is the story of Aphrodite, swords is the story of Athena, and grains is the story of Demeter. All of the majors are Titans, if I'm remembering correctly. So these are not normal, quote unquote, or more familiar Greek goddesses. These are the goddesses that are older than Zeus, that do not answer to him, but are his peers and equals, or even superiors. The Seven of Swords, who doesn't love the Trojan horse? But you guys have heard me talk before about how much I like goddess work. I think that storytelling is the way to go a lot of times. I think that sometimes our travel down the labyrinth is so confusing. We have such trouble seeing around the corners that it's easier to understand what we're walking if we understand the stories that we know of others who've walked those paths. I also think there's something sort of wonderful about decks like this that imprint on the questions you bring to them, however mundane, plain, seemingly low stakes, with a sense of the mythic. Like, you ask a question, and the Companion of Cups, who is the equivalent of the Queen of Cups, is here to insist that the question you have is a question that myth can answer. It infuses our stories with a sense of timelessness. I love the Erinyes. I love a dark goddess and a rage goddess and whatever. This gives you a sense of like where I am right now, right? I love them. They're so mad. The champions are the knights. And the children are pages. I think it's child, champion, companion, and queen. But, you know, we are that important. And sometimes it can be like, wait, hold on, keep things in perspective. We are not the stuff of myth. Everybody's story matters enough to them that it is worthy of mythic consideration. So to say that we are the stuff of myth is not to say, let's insist to others that our stories are as important as the story of Odysseus. It's to say, insist to yourself, validate to yourself that if this small thing feels like a big deal, it's a big deal. It's a big deal to you. It matters. And that the stories you know, the stories you've been told forever, have some lesson to bear on that thing. That if you're having an argument with your partner about the dishes, I'm sure none of us have ever had, that like this Three of Swords in the suit of Athena can speak to that. Thalassa, the goddess of the deep waters. Six of Arrows in the suit of Artemis. So, you know, I really appreciate that. I always have one or more decks that I'm working with as a part of that mythic or goddess work. But this deck, for some reason right now, these four Greek goddesses feel like they're really ready to speak to me. I'm not sure if it's just the art. I do think the art holds a good place for this season. This feels like even if I'm wherever I am in the highs and lows of my emotional summer, that this can hold all of that. And still maintain the brightness of summer. I know about you guys, but I do get seasonal depression sometimes. So fall brings with it the beauty of fall, but also some dips in mood. And so I especially appreciate the summer months. And I don't want decks, even if I'm working with decks, that help support wounds or dark moods or the shadows or whatever. I don't want to lose the beauty and value of those summer months that are so, you know, value them when they're here before they go away. And I appreciate a deck that supports all of that goddess work. So all 21, 22 of the goddesses in the majors and those four stories of the four named goddesses in the minors. I really appreciate that this shows the fullness of their stories and all of its, you know, beauty and pain and triumph and adventure, all of that, without losing the summer sun and without losing the lightness. I have and value and have talked about Tarot of the Crone. So Ellen Laurenzy Prince knows how to do dark art. She knows how to do some shadowy whatever. But for this deck, she did retain a lightness that I really value. So let's see what Greek Goddess Tarot has to say to all of us today, right now, has to say about her place in my practice this summer, and if and how she could work with you. What message does she have to offer? So we have the Five of Grains. This is Demeter grieving for her daughter Persephone, who's been abducted to the underworld. And Styx, the equivalent of death, the metaphorical representation of the river Styx that lies between us and the underworld. So we have, it's, you know, Styx sits between Demeter and her daughter. Like, Persephone is in the underworld, and Styx is a big body of water that stands between Demeter and the daughter she so yearns for. this seems to say something about using this deck actively. So whatever is going on that is calling us to this deck, and it doesn't need to be the big grief or tragedy of the moment, right? If I'm saying that it's a dark time in the world and I'm having trouble with that, that's not necessarily saying that this deck is for the management or engagement of that, although it can be. This is saying if I have a dip in mood or difficulty, for example, I've talked, I think, about how my dog Theo has a seizure disorder. He has epilepsy and has been diagnosed with epilepsy over the past few months. That's difficult, and that has caused some real challenges, some real pain and grief. It's gotten easier to manage, and he's okay now, as okay as somebody or some mammal with epilepsy can be. But this feels like it's saying, on the days, for example, when I'm feeling bereft about the difficulty of watching a little creature that I love really suffer, see the water. So this is the water, the river Styx, the barrier, the big chasm between me and where I want to be or what I need, the medicine, the healing, whatever. That this deck will help frame that. So like, hey, it's here, and this deck will help provide some clarity around that. But also, this isn't just about seeing that. It feels like, hey, work with me. We can swim the river Styx together. So pick me up for clarity, and then let's do some work so that this isn't just, oh, you pulled some cards and now you see the big dark barrier. But it's an active deck. You know, I was saying that I think that Bon Sequitur Tarot is get creative and go touch grass and whatever. This is saying, no, that's okay. Like, if you're in a difficult moment, if you're in pain or whatever, you don't need to go be creative necessarily. You can do that, but also it's okay to be here now in this feeling, but then let's do something about it. I think that often when we think of mythological work, we're not necessarily thinking about like mythology and then let's go solve the problems of daily life. We're thinking only about myth and our own mythic stories. How do we understand and frame our lives in a sort of spiritually macro mythic way? Sure, yes, and I love that work. But the thing that's most important about myth to me and about this work is insisting that it's relevant to the daily labyrinth. That like the day that today, whatever your nonsense is, whatever nonsense I'm dealing with, that our understandings of our stories as mythic metaphors is actually relevant to the walking and treading of that path, even if we can't see around the corners because the labyrinth is winding, right? And there's something really beautiful about this deck saying, yes, let's look at the chasm. I'll show you. It's there. I love a good validation, right? If you feel like there's a great big chasm there, I see it too. But let's swim it. We can do that together. And yeah, I really like that. I like that. I have an honorable mention. This actually isn't an honorable mention. This is a deck that I want to work with, and it feels very seasonally and, you know, emotionally, or like the mood I'm in, aesthetically what I like, the way I'm feeling lately. This feels like a deck that we share a synergy, but I haven't yet worked with it, and I'm still trying to figure out if there's a place for it for me. So let me grab this. This is actually the Circo Tarot. I know that it's out of print. There was an edition of this that came out. It's an indie deck that's been long out of print, but an edition that came out that was slightly amended and was created to accompany a learning tarot guidebook. So this is that deck. But this is a deck that feels relevant. It feels bright in a way that I like and need. It feels pertinent and important, and I'm still trying to figure out if and how now is the time to work with it. This is a deck that I absolutely plan on keeping and has been sitting on my shelf, and it feels like it might be the time to pick it up, but I'm not positive. So actually, let's pull some cards to figure out, is this the time for this deck? Is this the time for me to be working with the Circo Tarot? Look at this hermit. Isn't she a treasure? Okay. Let's do some shuffling. Is this the time for the Circo Tarot? We have Justice. And we have the King of Knives, or the King of Swords. Justice and the King of Swords. Love all of that air. We love all of that air energy, that incisive, cutting, get to the truth, no nonsense. There's a ruthlessness about both of these cards. The King of Knives is not patient. He's plain and honest. He's here to wield and weaponize the truth a little bit. Maybe I need that. So there's something to be valued there. And Justice is, as we know, like, be honest with yourself. I don't have time for your self-deception. So, you know, there's a little bit of a threat here. Like, if you're ready to be honest with yourself, I'm ready to talk to you. It's interesting. So I need to sit and think, am I ready for a kind of ruthlessness that I may very well need? Let's finish up. So I'll wrap up, as we like to do on this channel. You guys, this like rocking, I'm living for it. This is a chair that I got to read in. I was raised by a mother who would rock me as a baby, and I find rocking very soothing, so I love this. This is the first time I've filmed in this chair. But anyway, so you see me rocking here and there, that's what it's about. Let's pull two cards from Awakening the Unconscious. We like to do on this channel a reading for the collective to wrap things up. And as a thank you for joining us and listening to me babble for all this time, for 42 minutes. So our reading for the collective will be how to stretch our tarot practice this week and this season. So if I'm saying that these are the cards that have been working for me, how do I need to push myself and maybe try a different practice with these cards, or invite a new deck into that practice to stretch myself so that I don't just settle here in what feels comfortable? Okay, and I like to pull two cards because it's the magic that happens between the two cards. 10 of Cups. 5 of Cups. All right. You know, these are both Mars cards, if you look at them. We have Mars in Scorpio for the 5 and Mars in Pisces for the 10. Mars associated with Tower, the god of war, as we know. Cups being the suit of emotions. We have the card for emotional disappointment and wounds and shortfall. So when we are feeling emotional tenderness, that's more than just, oh, this is kind of a bummer, but there's something really painful here. We have that with the 5. We have the angel who's sitting with us, eyes closed, not open to be supportive exactly. But then we have the 10 that is robust, water pouring down, all of the emotion we could ask for, all of the fullness that we would want and need. So this seems like it's saying, go find, I think this is about, you know, I think that this is not about getting a new deck, like not buying a new deck, but like grabbing a new deck and inviting another deck. This feels like go get, go find a spread or go do something, go do some journaling that really probes at some disappointment or wound or pain, something that taps into that emotional shortfall, that difficulty, whatever it is, and consider the space between what that pain is, that disappointment, that wound, and what it would mean to be in emotional fullness. So what is that space between there? What's the river Styx between those two cards? And get to work swimming that river. Like it's the Greek goddess tarot's insistence that we do that work. I think maybe that's what I need to pick up and work with it as an answer to this. But like do some targeted journaling or a spread or some deep thinking or talking with a therapist or whatever that engages what wounds, pain, tenderness exists here and what would feel healthy, full, joyful, abundant here, and what it actually means to bridge that. It feels like naming the river, right? Like we know the name of the Styx here in Greek Goddess Tarot, but what is the name of your river that sits between that 5 and that 10? That's interesting, and I do love a metaphor. So I need to sit with that and think for myself. You think for yourself, see if that makes any sense to your practice. But in the meantime, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This was fun. I hope it wasn't just fun for me, that it might be fun for you too. And I would always love to help you do this work, not just collecting your decks, like here to help you collect decks. But if you want some help doing readings or doing your own river Styx work or whatever it is that you need support with, you can find a link in the description for my list of offerings. And until next time, guys, I will see you in the lab. Bye.